I'm gonna try to talk a bit about pain and stuff, but I'm gonna start talking a bit about me because I think it might have some relevance. As I said, I work as a business developer generally in a game incubator in a small coastal town in Karlshamn, Sweden. And before I began working with games, I studied social anthropology, interaction design, and a bunch of other stuff that doesn't really matter. And then I started working with PR and other weird stuff. I worked at Studio Total, mainly known for flying a small airplane in under the radar of Belarus and dropping teddy bear bombs all over Minsk with messages of just freedom. It's one of the last dictatorships in Europe, and you should all go and support the democratic movement there. They set off a small geopolitical disaster where we had to take home our ambassador, and they kicked out a few generals. And I've also managed two tattoo and piercing shops with a friend, where I worked as a manager and a piercing trainee. And my interest in pain ended up becoming a thesis in the end during my anthropology part. And this thesis ended up being the basis of this talk. So what I'd like to talk about then is pain, basically, both in general and in games. And I would also like to present a small game concept, maybe two, depending on if you're up for it. But it's still very much a work in progress, and I'm not necessarily a designer by trade. So I'd love to get some input in the end of it. I'm going to do this in quite short, maybe 15 minutes, and then I want to talk to you. And if you have questions, if you don't have a mic, if you just come up close to the scene, the stage, that would be great, because I think it would be easier to just have a good conversation without me just repeating what you're saying, answering, repeating, answering, you know. So to start off, we need to talk a bit about definitions. And the definition of pain that I will be using today is the one by the IASP, or the International Association for the Study of Pain. And the IASP, yeah, you can see it. Defines pain as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage or described in terms of such damage. This can be contrasted with Aristotle, who thought of pain more like a feeling, like you're feeling loved or you feel anger, or Descartes, who looked at it more like a sensation, like when you're freezing or when you get really warm, like if you're sitting outside there having a beer. As with all definitions, obviously there are some issues. Mainly, I think unpleasant might be a bit generalizing, because I think there are other ways to describe it. But for the topic of this talk, it will be a decent starting point. But we also need to define what kind of pain it is that we will be talking about. And we're going to make a kind of a broad generalizing statement, because there's no other way to do it, and separate pain into two types: planned pain and unplanned pain. If you get hit by a car, or if someone breaks a bottle in your face while you're waiting in line to get to the toilet, that's unplanned pain. That's something you don't know that you're going to experience. You don't choose it, you can't consent to it. It happens. It smacks you in the face and it's there, and you can't do anything about it. So that's not necessarily interesting, because you can't do anything. So that's not what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about is planned pain. If you get a tattoo, if you run a marathon, if you do a waxing, or if you self-mutilate, or if you just do any kind of self-harm, or eat something very spicy, there's different levels of pain, right? Then you're doing something you know is going to hurt. You might not understand the entire experience. You might not understand how much it will be hurt or how it will feel, but you know what you're going to do will hurt you in some way. And the game will be about planned pain. It involves planned pain, as consent is a really important part of it. So you will know that what you're about to do or get done to you will involve pain. And it's usually easier to accept when it's planned, because you chose this. You ate the spicy habanero chicken wings, you had the pain, and you know you're going to get it tomorrow as well, right? That happens. So you still chose to do this, and you thus consented to whatever pain may come out of that choice. Which brings us to another issue, that is about communicating pain to others. Because can you consent to something that you can't explain properly? Can you consent to something that you can't bring to another person? And in her book, Elaine Scarry made a book called The Body in Pain, The Making and Unmaking of the World. She points to the issue of communicating one's pain in the sense that, and understanding others' pain. There's a lack of vocabulary for communicating pain in the way it's experienced. And it's mentioned in quite a lot of the works, like The Culture of Pain by Morris. And there's also an essay by Jackson called After a While, No One Believes You. They both bring up the subject and they conclude kind of similar. It's kind of, you can never convince someone. If you have a headache, they have to believe you. Because you can't tell them what you're experiencing more than that. I have a headache. And when you're in pain, real, like deep, intense pain, language reverts into mostly primal sounds and vowels. It kind of regresses to a point before you started to form words. You could probably be the greatest poet of our time, and if I put like a fork in your knee, you will probably lose your tongue. It's not going to work. You will not write a sonnet about that at that time. Maybe later you try to portray it, but right then and there, your vowels and sounds, not words, which makes it really hard to portray what you're feeling. So for now, though, knowing that it's hard, if not impossible, to communicate exactly what pain you are experiencing will do, but this means that we can consent to engage in activities that will involve pain, but you also know that it will be really hard to communicate what we are feeling or what we are experiencing or what we have experienced before. Pain is both unique and universal for each and every person, as pain and our own notion of it is not only physical, it's also learned socially, both through like nuances in language, how we talk about pain, both in smaller groups and in larger contexts and macro levels, as well as previous personal experiences of it. A person with 10 piercings might not find another hole in the ear that big of a deal, but if you never had a metallic foreign object forced through the skin and opened up a wound and then had another foreign metallic object forced into that wound, it might be a weird thing. It might hurt. So up to a point, we will be able to empathize with each other, but you have to trust that person's feeling of pain, because they could never really portray it in a good way. And I really like this little piece by Bukowski. It kind of puts a nice, yeah, it defines it really well. I hope you read it, otherwise you have to check it out later on. But we also need to look at the actual interaction between the person giving pain and the person receiving it. Scarry writes about the relationship between the torturer, his or her choice of tools, and the person being tortured. She notices that many people see the tool as an extension of the person holding it. It's no longer a neutral object. It's not just a thing. It's not a dead thing anymore. It becomes an animated part, of extension of that person's hands or body. It's a part of that person giving you harm. So linguistically, when we talk about weapons, for example, we usually talk about them like in arms. You bear arms, you take to arms, which is kind of underlying that thing. So let's take a quick look at weapons and games where pain is not a mechanic, but violence is a part of the aesthetic, and the role of the player in inflicting and experiencing it. See, when you have a control in your hand, you're automatically disassociated from what you're doing. You have an avatar which is expressing or experiencing or do things which you can emotionally empathize with the struggles, but you're still very much not experiencing it yourself. With one button, you might get a headshot, put a knife into someone, and you feel good about it. Later on, you fail to duck behind a cover, and the screen starts filling with blood, and your little controller starts shaking, and that's basically the sensory experiencing you have of that horrible fucking thing. And also, Mario brings the pain to those Goombas. Like, there's you're nowhere near the grim realness of what that mushroom-enhanced boot is doing to the skull of that poor Goomba. And even like the amazing, I hope you tried the Line Wobbler. It's like a one-dimensional dungeon crawler thingy. It's lights and a shoehorn, but it still has a violent aesthetic. You still destroy things, destroy enemies. It's an amazing thing, but it has an abstract, violent theme to it. And it's just a weird thing that it's the default thing, because violence relates to pain. So I think games can be better or worse when it comes to making you empathize with these things, but the distance between your avatar and you is still there as long as you're holding a controller in your hand. There are different games that do this better and worse. Spin the Bottle, Bumpy's Party, and Bounden, for example, don't have the same disassociation. You basically are the avatars, and when you're playing, you're basically feeling the physical sensation of a digital game, or the physical sensation of a digital mechanic, which I think is really cool. And these games also involve consent and physical actions, much in the same way as the concept we'll be talking about. But what you consent to is usually a bit awkward rather than painful. And then we obviously have to mention the Pain Station, which is built by Berlin art students, which is basically a Pong machine where you put your hand on one side of it and you play Pong with the other, and then it hurts you in different ways if you fail things. Heat, slaps, and whatnot. But pain here is just a rumble pack. It's a gimmick. Pain here is the physical punishment of a lack of understanding of a digital mechanic. You didn't get the ball behind that person's racket. That person got it behind yours. And you get a physical slap for it. But it's not a mechanic. It's just a gimmick in that sense. I still think it's cool, though. So what I want to look at is what happens if we take it a bit further. Thanks to a discussion with Sabine Harrer, who is involved with Can't Touch This, check that shit out, last year at Amaze actually, I ended up thinking about how to build some somewhat clean game, I guess, like a simple game, where we could talk about the limits of consent and what we could expose ourselves to when it comes to pain, both giving and taking. And I wanted it to be a bit absurd, because otherwise it gets really dark quickly, I think. So what stuck with me was the idea of county fair games, because they were really easy to understand. You can see the goals fairly quickly. And I tried to translate the high striker. You get a mallet, a plate, and you smack it, and it rings a bell, and you're a big burly dude, and happy, go lucky, you know. But I don't want it to revolve around strength. I want it to revolve around pain instead, and consent. So the concept then would basically be maybe a whip or a paddle or something hard, decently hard, with a velocity meter attached to it. You could add a gag ball with a pressure meter and a microphone for where the blow is supposed to land, and also maybe a microphone by the mouth area, just to pick up sounds from there as well. And then you had whip speed, would be a multiplier, whereas sound plus pressure would be multiplied. So basically high score equals sound plus pressure times velocity. And since it's a co-op game, the high score would then be the combined points of the two participants. But there's no plans of enabling online multiplayer as of today. So the thing I've been struggling with the most is basically the setting of this game, because I think it then boils down to pressure. The pressure of being alone with maybe a stranger, maybe a friend, doesn't really matter. Like, take everything away from this room. You just sit one thing down in front of you. You talk about it. You decide to do it. There's a certain pressure that comes with that, and it's only you and your competition, partner, explorer, choose a word. And how will my performance change in these settings? We'll get into the variables of humans or your co-players later on, but just picture yourself in that room. You've decided on who would be the hammer and who would be the nail, work in progress variables. Would you swing, like, with all your might, just because, like, you want to, or you want a high score, or you you think that that's what you consented to, or that's just who you are. You know that the other person will be hurt, and you know it's their turn next, so what will you do, right? And if you're the nail instead, will you try to hold back as much as possible, not to act on the pain, you don't want to come off as a weak person, because we still have that idea of stigma. And on the other hand, we have the pressure that comes from, like, if I set it up now, in here, in front of all you fine folks, there's a whole other different mechanic. Because, like, people are curious. If you do something awkward, if you do something painful in a crowded room, regardless of whether you're the person giving or receiving pain, you're suddenly handling the idea of people seeing you in pain, or seeing you being violent. And this dynamic obviously also shifts with the crowd. So a heterogeneous or homogeneous crowd, sex-wise, is a whole different thing. It contains different experiences carried within them, and this, like, every person has a different idea on a thing, and this kind of creates like a meta field of knowledge, experiences, ideas, and this then in turn creates a whole new fucking abnormally large thing that just does, like, all the actions, all the impressions, and all the stuff you could do. So if you would be up here right now, would you go at it? Would you, like, really go for it because you don't want to come off as someone who does something half-heartedly? Or would you not do it? Would you try to do it just a little bit because you don't want to look like you're being a violent person, but you kind of want to try it because you're already up on stage? I don't think there's a wrong and right here. I think there's insights to be gained about both yourself and about the other person, as well as maybe the crowd, when you do this. So, right. What's interesting here then is I can give you consent to hit me within the limits of this game, and I know there will be a certain amount of pain involved. What I don't know is the more intimate stuff, like how strong are you? Will you give it your all? How much hurt are you willing to put on me in different settings? If we assume no one tries to break the game by just biting down really hard or screaming without even it doesn't really hurt, would you go for the high score just for you want to win, or you think it's funny because you're the first one with the paddle and you don't know what you're up for? Would you do that? And what would be the effect if you knew that when you've had your shot, you're going to trade places? How will my relationship with you change after I've hurt you? And how much will it change after you've hurt me? What will happen afterwards? So in the end, when you play this work in progress concept thing, you're consenting to being a part of a planned but mostly unknown amount of pain, a pain which is personal and unique in such a way that you won't be able to fully translate it and communicate it to the person you're playing with. And then afterwards, you have a role switch. And that's probably influence your next move, so to speak. So it's a cooperative game, but it's also a question about how and how far we will cooperate. And I think the worst case scenario, you'll end up with a bruise, and best case scenario, you have learned something about yourself, the other person, and maybe the other people around you as well. And that's basically it. And now I want to talk, because now I'm with you, because I'm tired of talking to myself. I want to know what we can learn about ourselves, what you think that you might learn about yourself in this setting. I want to know what we can learn about games as a medium if we start taking pain seriously and not as a aesthetic dumb choice. Counter-Strike doesn't need to be violent. It could have been whatever. It could be about jumping hoops or shooting or blowing smoke. I don't know. It could have the exact same mechanics without being violent. And thus, I also want to know about other concepts that are painful but not necessarily playful. They can be playful as well, but they don't need to be. Questions, ideas, discussions, hands up, then move over here and I'll try to stick the mic in your face without doing something weird with the cable. Or have I made everyone awkward already? Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So about sports, right? Boxing, football, soccer, whatever you call it. I should be asking you questions, but really I'm just wondering, how does, pain add to that experience? Because I know as a kid, I never really enjoyed any of those physical activities because I didn't enjoy getting hurt, whereas all the other boys did. What's your opinion on that? How would that? Because in a way you could say that pain is part of that experience. Pain is part of boxing, whether you like it or not. How could that be translated to a digital medium, you think?
I think that if you break down what boxing and these sports are in general, they're basically war games, right? They're Counter-Strike. It's just that, if you get a headshot, it actually hurts in boxing. So I think there's translations-ish, but I don't know if I want to make a violent game that is so competitive, because I think a competitive element is really interesting, but it could also really fucking derail things like out of control. That's also the issue with having two people play with each other by violent means, because we can consent to things, but I don't know, if you really get into it, I mean, it would suck if I knocked you out. I guess, it could be a really weird thing. But pain is also super intimate, and if I did prototype these things, most of the people would not play them. Maybe people would be interested in them, but most people would not play them. Most people who do play them won't go at it. They will try it because they're curious, just like you do with, most people get a piercing, maybe in the nose or maybe in the ear. Not everyone goes for a full-blown Prince Albert stretched to, smithereens. So that's just, it's really, really, really niche. It's like niche. It's like niche. Puns, sorry. No, but I have literally no idea, which is basically why I want to talk about it. Maybe next year we can do a painful game jam or something and just exhibit something weird here. Could check that. Bring needles, I guess. Sorry. Any other questions? I'm completely awkward. That's why I'm making light of this subject. Hey, I'm not trying to.
I want to challenge a bit the notion that in the pain station, the mechanism is just a gimmick, because from personal experience and also from watching a lot of people play, the pain in the game is really asking and answering some of the questions you put on there. What is it like to lose a game when you really get hurt by losing it? And I think it's an important contribution. And the other thing, I don't know if you mentioned it, but SM would be something painful, playful as well.
If you're talking about the sexualized stuff, like S&M, but yeah. No, I really enjoy it. I like the pain station. It's just if it's a pure mechanical thing, then it's more of it happens outside of the game thing, rather than having pain as the actual thing. It doesn't. If you're really fucking good, you won't get hurt. But if you're really fucking good at this, you will probably get hurt. So that's what I mean. I do not mean to take anything away from the pain station, because I think that's a fucking cool thing. I obviously started there a while back. And as for S&M, it's it definitely has some of that, especially because I chose a gag ball because I'm dumb. It sexualizes things immediately. But S&M is also that's explicitly sexual. You can do it in. I think you can do games that are painful and not sexual. Probably. So how much time though? Just gonna do it quickly. Yeah. Yeah. if you're up for it, I have another concept, but it's a bit more weird. So I would probably need you to cheer a bit for that, because you're going to boo afterwards.
I really wanted to point out this aspect of multiplayer, because I felt like making games like that involve awkwardness or this kind of psychological consent, like this psychological pain. It's a really good potential for inviting some kind of negotiation of where to go. So in the pain station as well, you have consent between the players. And I think this is a really good playground to renegotiate your values or your boundaries and create a really playful interaction with the concept of intimacy. And so I think this is one of the potentials of using pain in play.
And this is Sabine, so you can see why it's easy to get inspired.
Yeah, one more thing about Can't Touch This. I would also recommend playing it as in a social group. So if you walk up there, just try playing Can't Touch This with your friends and see what happens. It's always fun.
I recommend that as well. So, should I do the other concept? Yes, applaud, do something. Good, because now people will start leaving the room probably. It's basically a racing track game where you have a mechanical racing track with 2 to 8 horses. Still a multiplayer game. And it runs an electrical current through each and every track, and each and every track is connected to a scale. And the more weight in that scale, the larger the current goes through the track, the faster your horse moves. If you don't do anything, the horse will move around the track and will finish, and game is over. Like that's the point of the game. You get around the track. You don't need to do anything for that. But the only tool you get is something sharp, and it's a really, really big scale, and it picks up on really small weights. So you can choose, if you really want to win, to just open up something or take something from you, put it in the scale, increase the electricity, and get in front of others. And then you have to then you have to start thinking about how would you react if we were sitting down having a nice little chat before, and suddenly someone actually goes through it, because it's also super neat. Like someone will do it, but probably no one will. Like in a group of 8 people, it's highly unlikely that anyone will, but sooner or later you'll find someone who actually will go through it. How will you negotiate that experience? What will happen? Like self-mutilation is a super, super intimate experience, and doing that in a social setting with other people is not only putting them in a position where they probably haven't been before, it's also putting you in a position where you haven't been before. And this is just, I just wanted to get away from the sexualized stuff a bit, and I think this is not that, and I think it's also sports-related-ish. So, but that one is super work in progress as well. And I do not recommend anyone to do any kind of self-mutilation or do like any kind of self-destructive behavior at any given time or moment or anything. If you feel like it, call someone, talk to someone, get out of it. But if you consent to do it in that setting while you're healthy and feel good about yourself, then it's okay in my world. Like if you want to do a thing, like tattoos are basically scars which you cut ink into. So if you can consent to tattoos, you can consent to that game. Yeah. Anyone else have anything? Otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up. Yep. I think we have to run.
You talked about the pain to the player, but what about causing pain to the spectators, or causing pain to the computer, or causing pain to the AI of a game?
Well, that's like causing a computer pain. Like, would you mean like driving a nail through a hard drive, or do you mean it like, yeah, no, like that? would be super interesting to go into, but then we have to talk about Latour, and Latour does not work well in a 5-minute setting. But if you want to talk more about it, I'll definitely do it outside, because then we have to talk about how dead things are not actually dead, like how they influence our daily lives, like road bumps. Do they think or not? Because they make me move, like slow my car down. Did that thing have an action towards me when I was driving my car, or did I take an action because of an engineer who built the road bump and put it there? Like, who is in charge of what I'm doing with my car in that sense? And that's the thing we have to go into if we have to talk about violence against dead things like AIs and computers. Like AI is way out of my league, I think, but like a computer I can talk about. And to others, like to spectators, to be in the room, you have to consent to be in the room as well. You don't casually walk down the street and suddenly see people playing this game, hopefully, because then we're in a weird fucking world, I guess. So I hope that doesn't happen. But seeing things is also like experiencing things from that perspective can be as much damaging as any fucking physical damage. So it's definitely something that you have to take and like think through before you put yourself through it. Like with anything, like, and don't do anything that you feel slightly awkward about when it comes to painful stuff. Unless you know it's safe and you really, really want to do it, because you're always going to be a bit like anxious about shit. But think it through and don't do stupid shit, basically. But we can talk more about the computer stuff. I'll be up for that. Yeah, I would like to say thank you to Thorsten, Lorenzo, my lovely host, and everyone else who's made this fucking event, because it's the best. It's like, I go to, it's like good coffee. It's the best stuff. Thank you.